Every business system has a human story behind it. What experiences shape someone who builds the bridges between creativity and commerce? Welcome to La Mesa Talks. My name is Oscar Mota, and for the past 7 years with my team, we've been exploring that beautiful intersection between creative passion and business growth. Our guests today bring a fascinating perspective to this conversation. Lee Hobeika has built sales team and operations across diverse markets, but I'm more excited to uncover that human journey that led him here. Before the strategies and the systems, people were finding their way, facing challenges, and discovering their unique ability to connect creative value with those business structures. What makes Lee's story particularly valuable for our creative community is how his personal experiences have informed his approach to building teams that truly understand what they are selling. Beyond that impressive LinkedIn profile and the technical expertise, there's a rich human narrative about discovering purpose in helping others grow. Join us for a conversation that travels from personal beginnings to professional insights, uncovering how authentic human connection fuels successful business growth. Lee, I'm so happy, so excited, so honored to have you here again. And I always say we've been friends for years, but I want to introduce you to my world. I want my world to get to know you a little bit better, right? Because those jewels that I found in my life, you just need to present them. You need to show them out there. So welcome. This is a very special episode as well, and we want to save the very, very special for the last because we are closing season 1, and we've explored a diverse array of humans and creatives and professionals, and we've spoken about community building with wonderful Heba, and we worked about creative resilience with Luma, or chaos and creativity with the wonderful Moish Awash, or motherhood and entrepreneurship and multiculturality and a bunch of things. The purpose of La Mesa Talks, the purpose of what we're doing, is just set up the scenario, set up the foundation for young creatives, specifically young female creatives in our industry, just to understand what it takes. I want to say to make it, but for you to have a well-rounded experience in how to put a team, how to scale, how to create. It's okay to be okay. Mental health is important. AI tools are important. But you have something that you bring something to the table with your amazing years of experience, which is you sort of tie everything up. Because you bring that experience from the technical and the creative and the business, and you have your feet pretty much placed on this. So this is why I'm so excited about this conversation. I always yap. But welcome to La Mesa Talks. Lee Hobeika, what are you up to right now?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I've been following the first season for the past few months, and I'm glad you asked me to join you in this adventure. What am I up to? Well, listen, it's been extremely busy for the past few months with the team. Our clients are keeping us busy, which is proof of their trust towards the kind of value we can deliver. We're hiring a lot of people for our clients. We're training them. We're building systems, tools, the backbone of their growth, basically. And there has been a lot of momentum in the past few months in the region as well as in Europe. And we're honestly blessed with the trust the customers have put in us. And we're trying to work hard to make it happen for them and for us. Just
so we're a little bit explicit when you're saying it's quite busy. You run a business that's called SuperSub. And SuperSub is dedicated. Their sole purpose is to just scale companies, 0 to 1, 1 to 1 million, and so on and so forth. So just for our audience to understand, and just a shameless plug, because SuperSub is a client of ours. We're a client of SuperSub for years now. Just a shameless plug. What is SuperSub?
Well, SuperSub, to put it simply, we're at the crossroads of processes, people, and tools. And we help customers understand how each of these components can play in their favor when it comes to growing. And growing is a very subjective term in reality, just like success is, depending on the cultures or the companies you're in. So what we try to do is understand what success looks like and what growth should look like for our customers. We guide them through the steps to get there. We tell them basically how the human component plays an essential role in getting there. And we tend to forget about this. And the reality is when you put, you build a CRM or a process or a tool, usually more focused on the business outcome than on the people component of it. And typically it fails because you fail to understand in the first place, upstream, how are your team going to be using the system or the tool, and how are they going to be excited or how clear they're going to be about why they're using it and how this can help them in their day-to-day. And ultimately, that's why systems fail. If they're not built for the people, they ultimately fail to deliver the outcome for the business itself.
That's a very interesting notion, and it's, in my opinion, what separates you from the pack. It's that, fine, I'm going to make you grow and I'm going to put your systems in place, but you have to understand that you need people to run the systems. Right? It's like all industrial revolution. You can't have machines that blow glass or that break coal or that create steam.
Yeah.
But in any case, you need people to run this, and it's not going to change. It's changing. It's transforming a little bit.
Yeah.
Not changing, but you still need people. So that notion of humanity in growth is what I think separates you from, or separates SuperSub from the pack, which is like your tagline is people, sales, growth. It's not growth, sales, people. It's not sales, growth, people.
Yeah.
It's people at the forefront of anything and everything that needs to happen. But before we dive into a little bit more of your technical expertise, and for me, it's very interesting also to explore a little bit more in depth Lee first, because again, I know you very well. We've known each other for years, but having again sort of this revisiting conversations is very interesting, and it helps you discover so much.
True.
So I would love to hear a little bit, so in a nutshell, because it's a long journey and you've been in a number of places, but what drew you to building successful companies?
I think it's a great question because I've been having a chat about this with a friend last week who's considering entrepreneurship. As far as I can remember, I've always been a great student at school, but I've hated going to school. And the reason why I hated this is because I felt everything was imposed on me, from the class you're in to your daily planning, to what you can and what you can't do in class, whether you're allowed to drink water or not. And ultimately, at the end of each quarter, let's say, or every year, you were assessed by a set of people deciding whether you've done a good enough job to move on to the next level. And if you draw this comparison with working in a corporate life, it's pretty similar. You get to the office, you're surrounded by people you don't necessarily pick yourself. You're stuck in meetings, or you have commitments all day towards your team member, towards your clients. And ultimately, every once in a while, there's a promotion cycle and someone decides on your behalf whether you can, move up the ladder or not. And ultimately, that's the reward for your hard work and your effort. Now, I think it's always been in me. Starting a business or growing businesses or supporting people growing their businesses, because, I understand where they're coming from and what they're aiming at. And that's what I wanted for myself. I wanted to have the freedom to be able to build, create, but most importantly, fail, but on my own terms. Not having someone imposing on me, aspects of my job or of our strategy that would cause me to fail. Obviously, we're always a component of failure. We shouldn't remove ourselves. But I like the idea of owning the full responsibility of success as much as failure. And that's what led me to this.
It's how you put it. It just defines sort of the development of the education systems that come from the Victorian era.
Probably,
right?
Yes.
So it's like because now that we mentioned Industrial Revolution, and we are now allegedly in the 4th or 5th Industrial Revolution, but back then they just needed to develop workers for a workforce.
Yeah.
So standardization was something that's very important.
Process.
So a homogeneous process or knowledge or understanding on the knowledge, and so on and so forth. And this is how right now in the corporate world, it's still happening. You still have the same processes, like you're saying, for assessing, scheduling, and the meetings and the protocols that you have, and how you deal with your people, how you deal with your business, how you understand growth, which is something that you and I always discuss. Like, how would you define success? Perhaps success is not that you get an A. Perhaps success is that years after you apply that same concept and you made it into something, right? So It's very interesting to see and how hard it is for us entrepreneurs into transforming that reality, because it's a reality transformation into saying, for instance, at La Mesa, how we operate.
Mm-hmm.
It's the you do you kind of approach, right? And it's hard to control, but people perform on their own terms.
Yeah.
And creativity, it's a little bit more free, right? So you need to have a box and you need to have some limits, but how would you define, or how do you redefine that? And I like that analogy. I'm a very good student, but I don't like school, right? So I'm a very, very, very good performer, but Super Sub has been transforming at the same time. Every other year, because you're not comfortable in your shell, and it's like, okay, elbows out, let's shift these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And it has happened. But from all the story, what was that defining moment that sort of triggered that I'm going solo, I'm going to do my thing?
Well, I think there's been a bunch of aspects that led to this decision. So I always knew I was going to end up there. But there were a couple of personal triggers that led to this. The first one is one of my brothers is an entrepreneur. So you always look up to your elder brothers and you're proud of what they've been achieving. And so you're like, okay, maybe I should be able to do the same, or I should be actually able to do the same. And the second reason is during the first month of COVID, I lost my job. And I also saw my entire team being let go, which was a very painful moment, as you can imagine. Realistic, like it was a reality check, even though these things, when they strike you, when they hit you, they're even more, let's say, painful as you would have imagined. So those were the main triggers. The first one was being encouraged by my personal environment, my family environment, knowing that one of my brother had done it multiple times. So everything is possible. You just put your mind to it and you try. And in his own words, as a matter of fact, he always says everyone has great ideas, but nobody's willing to execute or try them. And so that was also a wake-up call for me. I have ideas. I just need to, try, execute. If you fail, you fail. And if you succeed, well, you move forward and you continue. And the second part was obviously the layoff. It was just a wake-up call, and it was just the right moment, the right time, with the right mindset to move forward. And that's how I started Super Sub.
You need to understand something about this gentleman or us working together. He's always 2 questions ahead, and then I'm always 2 questions ahead. And this is how our conversations usually happen. The 2 main points of conversation that we're going to follow this are specifically what you mentioned, and I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. Mm-hmm. Number 1, it's a key challenge that transforms your mindset. But let's focus on that first month of COVID. You were in a multinational, one of the largest at that point, ride-hailing food delivery companies in the world.
Yes.
A lot has changed. You had a very interesting position that covered a wide region and a huge team.
Yeah.
How was that transformation? And it was a massive transformation, but if you can, in a nutshell, what was that transformation, that challenge, that fuel on that specific time? Yes, you got let go, and then your team got let go. What were the lessons into the adversity and that into fueling yourself with that challenge?
Yeah, I think it never changed the way I wanted to build and manage teams. So it wasn't a trauma for me. It was, on the contrary, the proof that, or the signal or the sign that I could actually do this on my own, and I can do it even better. I had always put a lot of pride in the kind of people I had hired on the team. To give you a bit of context, we had operations across multiple markets, and we had Arabic-speaking salespeople selling remotely, including from Europe. And I made it a point to hire people who needed work more than ever, people who came from countries that were struggling either through the economy or because of wars, and who had potentially moved abroad to be able to work and provide for their families back at home. And so I thought, listen, this is possible in the frame or in the context of a massive multinational company. Anything I do moving forward, I need to do, follow the same philosophy, the same mindset, and I need to be able to do this at scale, whoever I work with and wherever it's needed. And I ultimately built my business, as well as I support customers building their businesses with the same mindset. Build for the people and around the people, hire people who really want to work, who have the grit, this resilience in them, and who are willing to just learn every single day. The point you made earlier about the Victorian system, how it's basically reflected or transcribed into our workplace, think about it. The job description itself is just what you're expecting from an employee to be able to execute on right now or in the very near future. But when you hire this way, you're typically impeding your ability to grow and impeding the employee's ability to grow. So when you think in those terms, you're limiting everyone's potential. Now, I'm not saying everyone's capable of everything. That would be a lie, and that would be dishonest from me and from anyone. But the reality is, you need to be able to build an environment that is productive, comfortable, and uncomfortable at the same time for everyone. And so I took this philosophy with me, and that's how I decided to move forward with growing my business, but also supporting our clients this way.
Starting when we were starting La Mesa Talks, we had a wonderful conversation with Rasha Hamse, which is now an entrepreneur as well. Comes from very, very, very good positions in our industry, in established companies, and we touched a very, very, very interesting point that I wanted to ask you about, and we talked about the importance of mentorship or example, and we discussed. You just mentioned your brothers. You guys are very close, family wise. And you basically did everything together. Now you're very close, still different geographies, but still very close together. Who, apart from your big brother, do you have a mentor or you have a key figure that shaped this? Because this is a mindset that doesn't happen miraculously.
Yeah.
You're not, and again I say that self-made idea or concept is just a lie. It's a fake construct that is just we cannot do anything by ourselves or build something by ourselves, right? So apart from your oldest brother, do you have a key figure that shaped this mindset?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't want my other brother to blame me from not mentioning him. He's the oldest one. I think my brothers were key figures in my life. I took the academic path. I chose because or thanks to them, depending on the perspective you take. I think my parents have been instrumental as well. They've invested everything they had in us, and they gave us an amazing education and an environment where we could strive. And ultimately, as you said, there's no such thing as being a self-made person. They made us who we are, and that's thanks to their effort and their sacrifice. Now, from a professional standpoint, I had a boss in another massive tech company back in Ireland. This person was the incarnation of kindness and empathy, but he was an extremely strong business leader. And he ended up being my manager because my manager at the time resigned, and he was my 2 levels above me. And one thing he made me realize, and he told me over and over again, was, first of all, don't put all the weight of the world on your shoulders. And I was very young back in the day. We're talking 23, 24 years old. I was a salesperson, but I felt I had the responsibility of bringing our vision to the markets I covered at any cost. That meant working from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. every day, weekends as well, to cover the regions remotely from Europe. And he realized I was just putting way too much pressure on myself. And he took me apart once, as one does in Ireland. He took me to a pub. And we had a long chat about it. And he told me, listen, the world and our business is never going to collapse because you didn't hit your target or you didn't call back a customer on time. But when you start your career and you're in such a competitive environment, and I'm not saying competitive in the sense that people were just being aggressive towards one another, but you're surrounded in these companies by extremely smart people who are here to succeed. And they all have this entrepreneurial spirit as well, even if their employees are in a corporate environment. And so ultimately you put much more pressure on yourself than you should. And that's, that manager who ended up being he's right now in an extremely high position in a massive tech company worldwide. He's a C-level. And I understand why he is, because he's managed to actually bridge the business intensity and the need to be extremely resilient from a sales and revenue standpoint, with the human component that brings empathy to the table, including on these very demanding jobs. Because when you think about it, sales, you need to be smiling internally all the time. You need to be smiling externally to your clients all the time. And whenever things are not going well in a business, we point finger at who? Well, typically it's salespeople or sales departments. So that's what he told me, and that's how I'm running my life now.
Yeah. They're defining moments, defining concepts, but everything revolves. And this is something that we discuss all the time, and this is why we have the Be Kind and that kindness movement story that we have. You have to lead with kindness.
Yeah, you have
to yourself, to others. Yes, you have to be stoic, and there's going to be people that are going to be rude. You don't know what others are. Like I say, we're all in the same.
Yeah,
we're all doing the same.
It's true.
You might not have screaming kids at home, but you have some situation that impacts this. So understanding that it's conducive to seeing the human rather than just the moment.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
You're not being a dickhead with me right now because you just have a massive ego. Something is happening.
That's true.
Something is happening. Rather when you remove that or you put that in the equation, like you just shrug and it's like, okay, next. Right?
Yeah.
Now, let's get a little bit technical, Lee. What personal values do you find? And we start again, kindness, empathy. So there's a lot of creativity involved. But what kind of personal values do you find that are non-negotiable in building your teams or your clients' teams or your systems or your client systems?
I think the challenge with this question is that even a word can be interpreted differently, right? And I'm going to tell you which one I'm going to pick. For me, the most important value, no matter what I do or my teams do or what I ask my clients to do, is ethics. But ethics, fortunately, can be taught, but it's not necessarily a universal value or defined exactly the same way, depending on your background, your culture, potentially even your language. But when I think about ethics, I'm talking about the idea that if you do something, you should be able to live with it and sleep at night, after you've done it. And any decision you make, anything you say, you need to be able to live with it. And that's my definition of ethics. And broadly speaking, it's probably a combination of my upbringing. It could be based on religious beliefs. It could be based on, studying. I remember having a business ethics class back at university, which taught me a lot. And it was related to media and advertising, as a matter of fact. What are you allowed to say and what aren't you allowed to say? And will you regret it? But ultimately, if you make decisions based on, let's call it ethics again, but it's a broad concept, and people who are going to be viewing or listening to this podcast are going to be probably wondering what they would consider as ethics. But in a nutshell, it's make sure you think and you do the right thing. No matter what, it shouldn't contradict the core values you follow. If you can sleep at night, it means you've made the right decision. And it's as simple as this, which could translate into when you price a project for a customer, as simple as this, be as conservative as you can. Your customer has money, but if they were able to save a bit more, they could be potentially paying their employees more or providing them with a better environment. So it's always a trade-off. What are you willing to do the right thing, in the hope that your clients or your teams will actually also behave the right way?
I always tell this to my son, and I tell this to my team as well all the time. You do the right thing because you have to, because it's the right thing, not because you have to.
Yeah.
Right? But he's not going to do it. Okay, they do it. But we have to price it because they're going to lowball us and they're going to lose the project.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
True.
We have a process. We have so. I think it's embedded not only in yes, it's your upbringing, yes, it's your experience, but you've gone through so many things with clients, companies, and stuff. This is like I'm not going to do it. I'm not going there.
Yeah,
I'm not going there. So you're expecting everyone to not go there.
True.
Regardless if the market goes there.
Yeah.
Follow your path. Don't deviate. Now, discussing a little bit more about the human element.
Mm-hmm.
How, Because values and ethic and kindness and empathy are important and are wrongly called soft skills. Because if anything, for me, I usually call them human skills. These are the hard skills.
Those can't be replaced really by any kind of tech, at least for now.
And these are the hard kind of skills that you have to learn the hard way. Excel, that's not a hard skill. You learn it. How do you create culture? How do you create culture when you have artists and analytical people and business people? Think of us. We've done this exercise for La Mesa. We have people that's extremely creative and methodical and extremely creative and just a mess. And we have people that's more in business and super strategic, and you have a combination of both. And this is the reality. So how do you create culture? How would you advise that you create culture when you have these 2 feet on the analytical and the business and the creativity?
Yeah. Well, it's a very complex question to answer, but I'll give you a few thoughts about how I'd approach things. The first aspect is walking the talk. So no matter what I'm expecting my team to do, I would do first. I lead by example, and I succeed by example, but I also fail by example. I want teams to be comfortable trying things, and that's why I try things. I like teams to be comfortable potentially pushing back on a client or another team member the way I would do it. So that's the first thing to make them comfortable, is to see that the person they potentially look up to or refer or report to can do it and does it. That's the first thing. Talking about making sure that cross-functional teams with very different backgrounds and ambitions can work together. I think the idea is that inconsistencies in collaboration and friction happens because of ignorance, right? Just like we're seeing our society evolving towards, a different place right now, and you have a lot of conflict, a lot of people on social media coming up with very conflicting ideas or opinion on every single matter. This comes from the fact that you might be ignorant to the way other people can think or can behave. And so it's the same in a company. The salespeople are usually looking at creative teams and marketing teams, for example, as lazy teams, simply because they're spending their time creating content and design, and they don't necessarily see how long it takes to build these things and what could be the potential impact. And it's also beyond the process. This is a long-term investment. When you create a brand, it's for years. It's not for days or for weeks. And on the other end, marketing teams or creating teams or any kind of creative teams can be frustrated by sales and revenue teams simply because they're not fully utilizing what they're doing. They might be sending out a message on the market that is contradicting what the branding or the marketing team had put in place. But all of this happens for simple reasons. First of all, there's no frequent communication between these teams. They report to different managers or departments. They don't understand each other's metrics. They don't understand the kind of constraints they need to deal with. They don't understand how long it takes to produce a podcast, just like a marketing team doesn't understand how long and how difficult it is to engage with a customer who's like unresponsive, how stressful it can be. But the moment you put everyone around the same table, whether it's a physical one or a digital one in today's world, especially if you have remote teams, and you get, first of all, people to understand what each team's mission is, what metrics they're assessed on, the kind of constraints they need to work with, the long-term versus short-term benefits of what they do, and so on, you educate each party and hopefully create a bit more empathy thanks to this. And then the second stage is getting them to work together from time to time. A lot of big tech companies encourage their employees to work, part of their time on projects or initiatives that are unrelated to their core job. Now, realistically speaking, it doesn't happen all the time simply because you have stress and time constraints. But the moment you get people involved in each other's projects or initiatives from different departments, ultimately you create synergies you wouldn't have expected. And a good example is the kind of work we're doing together. If I had let you work on a website update that was very marketing focused, I wouldn't have gotten the message I want as a salesperson, which is people buy because they have challenges, they don't buy because everything is fancy and nice and innovative. And ultimately, if we can bring those strengths together and this way of thinking together, we will be better off. And that's how I encourage my teams to work. So first of all, you walk the talk. Second, you remove the ignorance or the lack of understanding part of the equation, and then you get them to work together. And ultimately, they're human beings. All they want is collaborate and communicate and have fun. And that's ultimately how you get there.
You have to get in someone else's shoes all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
Always. We're always frustrated by our peers. Sometimes they don't have the competencies to get things done, and that's fine. But most of the time, we assume bad intent when the philosophy should be always assume good intent. And if we come to the office or come to work every day with this mindset, first of all, we're more resilient and we're less frustrated. And second, once we're in the right mindset, we can collaborate much more effectively. So it's just a vicious circle or potentially a virtuous one, depending on how you look at it.
And how you do it. And also how well crafted your culture is.
Yeah.
And it's a very sort of difficult statement, just how well crafted your culture, because culture can be crafted. It's not a matter of a month, it's a matter of years, it's a matter of people.
It's like brand, basically.
It's life. It's the brand of life. It's you have to build it. So as a leader, and being a leader of people is extremely complicated. Being an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, you end up doing what you do and you become a leader of people. So the empathy and again, it's just the link. If you start just threading on all the conversations how we're touching is your values of kindness, empathy, being explicitly open into get on the other people's shoes, just explicit. This is how we do. Our mission is to do this. We're not here to cure cancer. We're not here to go to take a man to Mars. Let's not we have to be real about it.
Yeah.
We're not going to cure cancer, guys. But we are on a mission and we have to deliver, and delivering means X. But there's something very important, is that as humans, we're all different. We might have systems, contexts, and upbringing and education that might point towards a direction.
True.
But how do you approach, or how would you approach leader development in a way that you can honor that personal space and you craft the leader to be a leader and not to be Lee? If you get me.
In their own way.
You're not creating an image of yourself. You're developing, because the walk the talk thing is like, oh, okay, so he's rolling his sleeves and working.
Yeah.
So he's coming and showing up, right?
True.
But there might be someone that doesn't approve of your style. And that's okay. So how you develop that leader and not Lee?
I guess it depends on your definition of leadership, right? If leadership is about being able to inspire, being able to problem solve and show people how to problem solve and be supportive of your teams, then no matter how you get there, ultimately if the outcome is there, you've done your job and you are a leader. I think if you go upstream, way upstream, the question you first want to ask yourself is the person willing to be a leader? Do you want to become a leader no matter what the definition is, whether it's formally as a manager or director or VP, or simply through your aura or your charisma or your thought leadership? Some people end up choosing this path simply because it's the right one or the formal one you need to follow as a corporate employee or as a team member. You need to grow up the ladder. You need to become a manager, then a senior manager, then a director, then a senior director, a VP, and hopefully a C-level. Maybe this is not the journey or the path you need to pick. Maybe there's something else for you. So understanding why the person has chosen this path and why they want to become a leader is the first priority, in my opinion. And then ultimately, you can steer them one way or the other, depending on what they're trying to achieve. And this could mean being a contributor that leads the way in many different aspects, or a manager who's leading a team. So you need to start there. Once you decide, or when you understand or you agree with this person where they need to head, ultimately, you need to give them the tools to succeed as a leader. And as I said a bit earlier, being a leader means, first of all, walking the talk. No matter how you talk, you need to walk accordingly, and vice versa. So we might have very different styles. It doesn't matter, as long as people understand why and how you're doing things. And as usual, there's no bad intent. You're always trying or striving towards improving everyone's situation. The second component is giving them the tools and the keys to, succeed. I might have different ways of problem solving or communicating, but the outcome ultimately needs to be the same, no matter how we approach things. So an example would be, I'm very direct in my communication. I don't sugarcoat anything. I don't beat around the bush. Maybe I am during this podcast because I'm thinking through my answers before getting there. But reality is, be direct. Don't beat around the bush. Don't sugarcoat things. And I'm hoping that people will understand where I'm going. But some people are not comfortable with this type of communication. And a leader or someone who wants to become a leader might not be comfortable with this type of communication. And I won't blame them for it. And also I won't force them to be like me. But the idea is, if you explain to anyone where they are and where they need to be, ultimately the path they take and the way they get things done in reality shouldn't matter to me as much as it matters to them. And we talked about ethics earlier. They might have a different perception of what ethics is or are. Ultimately, as long as they get to the right place with the right mindset, the journeys or the paths they take are their own decisions.
You just play the role of the quality control, like it's very paternal or maternal if you want, like you observe your child discovering the universe, discovering the world, and it's a matter of pride. Same thing happens with it, and it's a very interesting point. You're here, I wanted to put you here. Yeah. My job is to put you here, but the path that you're going to take, you have to decide. And it's good if you decide to do it or not, but you have to. True. Because if we want to grow together as a group, as a team, as a company, you have to step it up. Yeah. And you have to, right? So creating new dynamics of culture, company culture. It's not perhaps that you're going to be, or at least this is my approach, because I also come from corporate, and I felt I never fit because I don't want to call it free spirit, or I don't want to call it undisciplined. I don't want to put a label in it. But if I want to put you here, and if we want to be here, we all have to take the path, right? So it might not be that you are a senior director now. It might be that you take another responsibility. It might be that we execute an idea that transforms the business, but it was yours. And you have the responsibility to execute it.
Yeah.
You don't know how to do it, figure it out.
True.
F up here in this safe environment, but do it.
That's true. In reality, if we force things, you look at the average trajectory of an employee, they want to become a manager. And they see this as the next logical step. But when you force yourself through this path, you might not even be ready to do it, but you believe it's the right way to go simply because this is what the books say. In my career, I've been lucky enough to have two aspects kind of coinciding or happening at the same time. One, I was, from a competencies perspective, ready and mature enough, but also I've managed to seize opportunities that were business opportunities internally, let's say entrepreneurship within the company, that offered me chances to prove myself, to prove my skills, my thought leadership, and ultimately the promotions and the business growth happened together simply because they were synced. They were synced. But it doesn't always happen.
And did you make that sync? Did you force that sync, or just
in a way
you were lucky enough that
in
it
a
happened?
way? I think, listen, the reality is the most important thing from a business standpoint to grow in a company, in my opinion, it's the same as when you think about politics or any other aspects of life. Access to information. The more information you have, but most importantly, the more you can make sense of it, the more likely you're going to be able to think about the right thing or be in the right place at the right time. And so when I say, making these things happen together, it's judging when is the right time to push yourself forward, make yourself available, knowing what's needed from the business, but also knowing that you have what it takes and you have the guts it takes to get there and the resilience to make it happen. So it's both luck, but timing and self-awareness as well.
But luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So
that's true. And information lets you understand what the opportunity is and when you should intervene.
I mean, it's just a very sort of gross oversimplification of what it means, but it's like that. Like if you're well prepared, meaning you have information and you can make sense of this, and you see the opportunity, and you have enough drive or space to do it, it's like you're lucky. No, I busted my ass to be here, and I've been doing it consistently for I don't know how many days or years or whatever it is that got me here. So usually, and this is what happened lately in the past 30 years of and that's globally, you see the outcome, you don't see the process, and you care about the outcome. You couldn't care less about the process.
Yeah.
And the importance of the process, it's basically everything, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's basically everything. How come you get to do so many things? Well, because I have a wonderful team that helps me do it. I'm nothing by myself, if anything, right? But and talking about that, I'm sorry that I cut you because there's something very interesting that if you match up these two concepts, I have to give you the path. I have to show you the path as a leader. I have to give you the tools to create that lock, that preparation, so you can identify the opportunities.
Yeah.
Our role as leaders, then, as I told you, becomes a little bit of a QC, the quality control, right? How do you, or what would be your suggestion in terms of operational models? And I'm getting super technical. I don't really like it to put it that way, but what would be your suggestion for you to have that preservation of quality during growth? Right?
Yeah.
Because growth means transformation, mutation, differentiation. It's a bunch of things, but you have to keep it. I don't want to call it in a lane or in a box. But you need to have certain standards. So, is there something that you do sometimes with those paths, or that you suggest, or that you've seen that you can recommend for you to guide growth with preserving quality, quote unquote?
Yeah. I mentioned this briefly in our discussion, and I'm going to give you a more tangible example. A lot of our clients ask us to fix their CRM. For those who don't know what CRM is, it's a customer relationship management platform, and it's used mostly by sales team to manage their leads, their customers, and their sales efforts and processes. And most of the time, what people don't understand is it's true that to scale, you need processes and tools and systems. But if you don't build them with people at their core, they tend to fail. And so, to get back to your question, a good add-on to the story would be, well, the management wants reports and metrics to be able to build better governance around the company, the strategy, and the planning. And so they want a CRM to spit metrics for them, and so they build it accordingly. But they forget that the inputs for the CRM are human. And if someone doesn't understand why they're doing it, how they should be doing it the right way or in a more efficient way, but most importantly, how this helps them as well, either they won't do it or they would deliver a half-baked version of what the management is expecting. And so when it comes to growth, generally speaking, you need to follow a similar approach. To grow, you have a strategy, you have planning, you have targets, you have processes, you have tools and systems. Don't forget the people. And so if you want some guardrails on the quality and the efficiency of your growth, you need to ensure that people understand why we're growing, how we're growing, why did we build a process, why are we forcing them sometimes to follow a specific procedure, why do we get them or we ask them to use systems and tools and the kind of metrics these systems and tools provide. Ultimately, they need to understand this. Now, not everyone has the same level of business acumen to understand, let's say, very advanced strategies around revenue. But if you can tone it down and simplify it in a way that's meaningful for the business and for them, and they can translate this into their day-to-day, effort, then it's a win-win. But most of the time, people want to understand, and we tend to underestimate their ability to understand. Be as transparent as you can possibly be, and educate them as per why this is built this way and the kind of reasons or problems we're trying to anticipate. A process or a tool why are we asking you to input this data? How is this data point useful for you on a day-to-day basis, but for us on a long term in terms of governance and strategy? This is how we've translated this data into bigger decisions in the business. What do you think? So ultimately, if they're involved and they understand, they'll be better off and they'll work for you and in this direction and not the other way around.
In development or developers' terms, documentation. You need to create clear documentation.
Yeah.
When you hand over stuff, vision and mission is clear, and then the output and the inputs are clear enough.
Yeah.
We're living currently a moment of transformation. It's very interesting and scary because we're coming to the end of an era and the start of another one. We're just that generation that's just in that intersection. But definitely, we're not going to be fully replaced by technology, and this is the debate that everybody's having. Oh my God, they're going to take our jobs. The technology is going to take our jobs. Like same thing in our industry. When 40 years ago the computer happened, and then all the software stuff happened. Oh, we're not going to need any more interns, and the advertising agencies across the world were panicking because who's going to cut this stuff? And now, we're not.
Yeah.
If anything, it has given us more speed, more breadth, and more depth, right? Technology. Yeah. We talk from SuperSub and Lee about the people's important and the human touch. So in those processes and transparency and empathy and the quality control, how do you determine that sweet spot between determining what's technology or what should be technology and what definitely should be human? Because there's a bunch of automation stuff that's happening, and you have a lot of pseudo influencers claiming that you can replace 90% of your operation if you do agents on AI. And
True.
I mean, I think it's very interesting. The premise is very interesting. I don't think we're fully there, or we're never going to be there. But how do you determine, or how you tell your clients, because you work with those two super important components, that sweet spot between this is technology, guys, you have to automate this, and this is human. You need to have a human overseeing that technology, because otherwise it's just going to be just a machine running.
That's true. I'll go back to the concept of empathy and putting yourself in the shoes of the other person, right? So if you're a manager or a business decision maker, and you're asking your teams, or you're telling them, or you're thinking about automating part of the work they do, ask yourself, first of all, is it good for them? But most importantly, is it good for our customers? And typically, you'll realize, specifically when it comes to sales, which is our core focus, sales and revenue, people are still buying from people, and they want to buy from people. There are a lot of commoditized products and solutions that you can buy off the shelf, and you don't think twice about talking to someone. But when it comes to complex projects, complex business priorities that you're trying to solve for, you want to have a human being in front of you who's reassuring you, who's showing you empathy, who's giving you their time, and is an open ear and open eyes on your business. And ultimately, people who've been through the same challenges, because it's kind of a social proof. Oh, Oscar, you've been through this. Now I understand. You understand my own problems, and I'm more confident and more comfortable working with you or moving forward with this idea. So think in terms of empathy, and also in terms of quality. When everything becomes technology based, ask yourself, well, are we better off? Overall, is it a better experience? Is it more enjoyable? Is it more productive? Or we're just doing it because it's easy, it's a trend. And beyond this, it seems like it's more cost efficient, on the short term at least. But if you reach the point where every single business today runs on tech, automation, and AI, which I'm using, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, on the contrary, it's amazing. But if every single company runs this way, how do you differentiate? That's the question. And I train a lot of salespeople, and I tell them the way you need to think about your job is the following. The product or the service you sell is exactly the same as your competitors, and it's priced at the exact same price point. If you start from this hypothesis or foundation, the real question you ask yourself, how do you provide value and how do you differentiate at this stage? If everything is the same, pricing is the same, technology is the same, you have tools that automate communication, that send documentations and assets to your customers. On what basis will a customer buy if everything is the same at the same price point and is automated? And so if you look at the core, the essence, well, you'll discover that most of the time they'll buy because it was Oscar, it was Lee who was interacting with them. And that's the beauty and the value of it.
It's very interesting on how the usually we've been asked to think outside in. It's always look at what they're doing and differentiate yourself over there. Whether this approach, which is quite interesting and constructive, is no. Look at yourself first.
Yeah.
Create your own position, and then go out there.
True.
And just drift it up. Figure it out. See yourself in the position. After you've discovered yourself, you might spend a little bit more, but this is how you differentiate yourself.
Specifically on the long term, everyone catches up. Technology is a commodity these days. Everyone can use advanced version or pro versions of any software. And it's very easy to use overall. It's plug and play most of the time. So if you can differentiate through this, how do you do it?
Yeah.
How do you actually do it?
Yeah.
And specifically in sales, I always give this recommendation. When you think about optimizing your sales operations, think about conversion, then effectiveness. Experience, conversion, and then effectiveness or efficiency.
Yeah.
So first think about your customer experience, then how you're going to get there, and then how little you can spend in terms of time and money to actually convert.
Man, I honestly could spend days talking with you, man.
We typically do outside of this setting.
We typically do when we converge, which is quite difficult this past few days. But it's such an honor and a pleasure to get to see you thrive, to get to see you grow and doing what you're very good at, but still being yourself and unapologetically yourself, which is one of the greatest things that one of the greatest assets that you have as a company and that your company has is pretty much you have that imprint on the values, and that's what really makes the difference in a market like ours, in a business like ours. It's humanity first all the time. So we usually close with a set of rapid fire questions with the friends that join us. But again, thank you for this. It's been very enlightening and it's been a pleasure.
Same.
Let's start with one book that changed how you see the world.
I'd say A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking made me realize how little and insignificant we were in the cosmos, and it allows you to put a lot of things in perspective. Nothing really matters up until you realize something specifically matters.
The impermanence of it all.
It's a great book. It's very difficult. It's supposed to be a relatively simple version of cosmology and astrology, but it's astronomy. Sorry, but it's very difficult.
And I'm sure that there's a bunch of summaries or toned down questions for
probably a crash course on YouTube someone put together thanks to AI, as a matter of fact. So you'll find it online.
I know. Morning ritual that sets you up for success.
Okay, aside from the usual coffee and the smell of it, and I think you're also a big fan of coffee. For me, it's watching a couple of videos from comedy or satirical shows. I love a good laugh before starting the day because it allows you to put, again, things in perspective. Workday is not easy. Dealing with people is not always easy. But if you start off the day with a smile and a laugh, ultimately it's the imprint of it, and it stays with you throughout the day, and ultimately you end it also on a laugh and you're in a better place.
Helps you out. That shot of endorphins.
100%. 100%. I'm very direct, very serious most of the time, but I love laughing, and that's what I try to do. Now
let's go to the end of the day. What's your go-to relief strategy after a very shitty, challenging day?
As an entrepreneur, the day typically ends very late. I'd say spending a bit of time with your loved ones, it always helps. They show the empathy you need sometimes and the relief you need. But maybe on a fun note, I'd say I'd go and play tennis with my brother and kick his ass as usual. That's my stress relief.
He's still in Dubai.
He is still in Dubai, one of them, yeah.
What's the best advice you've received from a mentor or the mentor that we were talking about?
I think it's don't carry the weight of the world on your shoulder. It's not worth it, and you are not making such a big difference, at least short term. So take it easy. You're not saving lives specifically, unless you're a doctor or a nurse. Obviously you are. But in our world, we're just making things a bit better, slightly faster. That's it.
What skill keeps you curious after all of the success that you've had? Because yes, you are not big in size. But you're very successful because you've changed a number of lives and changed a number of trajectories. So
it's
yes,
subjective, right?
Yes. What skill keeps you still on your toes?
I'm a tech geek and I love technology, and I always thought I was very comfortable with tech in general, but with the pace at which things have been going, it's keeping me on my toes because I feel I need to learn every single day. And it's important for me, it's important for my work, it's important for my clients, it's important for my team. So ultimately it's keeping me, I wouldn't say up, but it's keeping me very, very, very aware of the change and the pace of it.
And I'm going to close with a very interesting one, which is a little bit more on the personal side. But tell me about a childhood experience that shaped your approach into team building.
I'll go back to school.
Yeah,
as I said,
the 90s.
I didn't like school. I really, to put it simply, I hated school. Just to a point where I would go down our apartment building, and I would hide behind a tree or a bush to avoid having the driver of the bus picking me up, and my parents would start looking for me. But I was almost an A student in every class I was in. I think what I realized about school is you're put in a place where you don't pick your peers. Overall, they're filtered because of the location of the school. If it's a private or a public school, it does influence the kind of people around you, but you don't get to cherry pick who you have around you. And so the way it influenced me is that I always knew I wanted to be surrounded by people, not necessarily who were like me, but I could learn from. And that's how I hired people with diverse opinions who are much stronger than me, than I could ever be on specific topics. And that's how I build and I manage teams. I bring people who want to work hard, who understand where I'm going, but they have their own ways of getting there. And they have a diversity on opinion that can challenge me and challenge each other. And ultimately, that's what makes our value, having different ways of getting things done.
Amazing. Again, today, and it's a very emotional moment because we've managed to finish, to finalize and close with a golden bow.
Thank you.
Our first season of La Mesa Talks, which has brought us so many great lessons. We've heard from so many great friends, different perspectives, specifically wonderful practical lessons in not only for me, because I'm constantly learning, but for everyone that consumes this or comes after. But in particular today, I'm very much touched by how the human side will always or should always be ahead of the professional expertise. You might be the greatest PhD, or you might be Cristiano Ronaldo. But like I said, if you're a dickhead, I don't want to work with you.
That's true.
Today's conversation reminded us of that very, very, very much. And that how an effective business system needs to be built with a human story in the back. Storytelling, brand, empathy, kindness. And it's absolutely transforming on how Lee, coming from massive, massive tech, is building a little empire that it just teaches so much of frameworks and so much of humanity through business. That resonates a lot with us in our time with Lee. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
If you haven't checked, go back to episode 1 and start from the beginning on La Mesa Talks. We'll see you soon, and thank you for joining.